You know the scene. Samuel L. Jackson, sitting at a kitchen table, getting shot 6 times for forgetting to move a van. Goodfellas made it look simple. A junkie screw-up who couldn't follow basic instructions. A throwaway death for a throwaway character. But that's not who Parnell Edwards really was. The real Edwards was a professional boxer, a disciplined athlete who sparred in Muhammad Ali's training camps, a guy who had real talent, a real future, and a real path out of Brooklyn. He didn't end up dead because he was incompetent. He ended up dead because Jimmy Burke needed an excuse. And he'd been dead the moment he walked through the doors of Robert's Lounge. Parnell Stephen Edwards was born July 19, 1950, in Brooklyn, New York. Not the romantic Brooklyn of movies and music videos. Brownsville, one of the toughest, most violent neighborhoods in the entire city. Working-class parents, father in a factory, mother cleaning houses, 5 people in a small apartment with not enough of anything. Violence was normal. Poverty was expected. But Stacks had something most kids in Brownsville didn't: natural athletic ability. By 14, he was 6 feet tall, lean, fast, quick hands, and good footwork. A local trainer spotted him street fighting and told him to come to the gym. That invitation changed everything for a while. Stacks started training at Gleason's gym in Brooklyn, one of the most respected boxing facilities in America. Muhammad Ali trained there. Joe Frazier trained there. If you could survive at Gleason's, you could fight anywhere. Stacks survived. He wasn't going to be a champion. He wasn't a future title holder, but he was good. Good enough to get noticed. Good enough to turn professional at 19. Good enough to fight 14 professional bouts between 1969 and 1974. 7 wins, 5 losses, 2 draws. Not spectacular, but real, legitimate. His trainers loved him because he showed up on time and never complained. Promoters loved him because he fought hard regardless of the purse. Stacks didn't drink, he didn't smoke, he trained 6 days a week. Boxing gave him something Brownsville never could: structure, purpose, identity. In the early 1970s, Muhammad Ali was preparing for some of the biggest fights of his career. His training camps were enormous operations, sparring partners, trainers, handlers, reporters, and fans constantly circulating through the facilities. Ali needed people to manage the chaos. Big guys, tough guys, men who could handle crowds, check credentials, and make sure nothing disrupted training. Stacks Edwards was one of those men. Now, here's what that actually meant, because later accounts exaggerated it. Stacks wasn't Ali's personal bodyguard. He wasn't traveling with Ali to fights. He wasn't in the inner circle. He was one of several fighters who did informal security work around the training camps, standing at doors, moving crowds, grunt work. But to a kid from Brownsville who'd grown up with nothing, being inside Muhammad Ali's world felt like success. That's the thing about proximity to greatness. It feels like the real thing when you're inside it. You forget that there's a difference between being near power and actually having it. Stacks would spend the rest of his short life confusing those two things. By 1975, Stacks was 25 years old, and his boxing career was dying. His record wasn't improving. Title fights weren't coming. And the money a journeyman boxer in the 70s earned, maybe $2,000 a fight, 4 fights a year, simply wasn't enough to live on in New York. He started missing training sessions, stopped showing up for sparring appointments. Promoters stopped calling. That same year, a trainer offered Stacks a full-time job at Gleason's gym, training young fighters, running the facility, steady income, a legitimate future. Stacks turned it down. He said he wasn't ready to give up on fighting yet. He wanted one more shot at a real purse. That shot never came. And by the time Stacks was ready to accept the offer, it was gone. Someone else had taken it. Without structure, without boxing, without purpose, Stacks started drifting. Construction work for a few months, bouncing at nightclubs. Nothing that stuck. He'd spent a decade training to fight, to endure violence, to survive. Those skills don't translate to the 9-to-5 world. And then came cocaine. Casual at first, recreational, but cocaine in the late 70s was expensive, addictive, and relentless. It required money Stacks didn't have. So he started moving toward people who did gamblers, bookies, small-time criminals hanging around Queens, and through those connections, he ended up at Robert's Lounge. In Jimmy Burke's world, Jimmy Burke was 46 years old in 1977 and ran hijacking and fencing operations out of Robert's Lounge in South Ozone Park. He was always looking for muscle, guys who could drive, guys who could follow orders, guys who were expendable. Stacks Edwards fit perfectly. He was big, he was tough, he was known in the neighborhood, and most importantly, he was desperate. Burke didn't recruit Stacks because he was smart or ambitious. Burke recruited him because Stacks was available and replaceable. The money felt incredible at first. $200 for a night's work, $500 for a weekend, $1,000 if the job carried risk. For a guy who'd been scraping by on boxing purses, this felt like wealth. Stacks started doing regular work for Burke's crew in 1978. Driving cars, moving stolen goods, standing watch. He was close enough to the action to feel important, but far enough from real power to be completely disposable. And that is the most dangerous position you can occupy in organized crime. Because the moment you become a liability to men like Jimmy Burke, you don't get a warning. You just disappear. December 11th, 1978, 3:17 in the morning. 6 armed men walked into the Lufthansa cargo terminal at JFK Airport and walked out with $5 million in cash and nearly $1 million in jewelry. The biggest cash robbery in American history at that time? Burke masterminded it. Tommy DeSimone executed it. Henry Hill facilitated it. And Stacks Edwards was given one job. One single job. Drive the getaway van to a scrapyard in New Jersey and have it crushed immediately, within hours of the heist. The van had fingerprints, forensic evidence, and traceable materials all over it. If police found it intact, the entire crew would be exposed. This was the most critical task in the entire post-heist operation. Burke gave it to Stacks. His cut, $10,000. All he had to do was drive 15 miles and watch a van get destroyed. Stacks didn't do it. He drove the van to his girlfriend's apartment building in Ozone Park, parked it on the street, went inside, smoked cocaine, and fell asleep. The van sat there for 3 days. On December 14th, police found it, towed it, processed it, lifted fingerprints from the steering wheel, the door handles, the gear shift. Stacks' prints were all over it. So were prints from other crew members. The FBI now had physical evidence linking the crew directly to Lufthansa. Burke found out on December 15th. He didn't yell, he didn't threaten, he just made a decision. Stacks Edwards had to go not as punishment, but as housekeeping. Stacks was a loose end, and loose ends got cut. He told Tommy DeSimone to handle it. Tommy said, okay. 3 days later, 6 in the morning. Tommy DeSimone and Angelo Sepe drove to Stacks' apartment in Ozone Park. They knocked on the door, Stacks opened it. Sweatpants, t-shirt, up all night. Tommy walked in, Angelo followed. Stacks' girlfriend was sitting at the kitchen table. Tommy told her to go to the bedroom. She went. Tommy turned to Stacks, no explanation, no argument, no chance to speak. He raised a .38 caliber revolver and fired 6 shots. 5 hit Stacks in the face and chest, 1 missed and lodged in the wall. Stacks died instantly and collapsed to the kitchen floor. The whole thing took 11 seconds. Tommy and Angelo walked out, got in the car, drove back to Robert's Lounge, and told Burke it was done. Burke nodded. That was it. Parnell Stacks Edwards, former professional boxer, man who'd worked inside Muhammad Ali's training camps, was dead at 28 years old, executed for forgetting to move a van. But here's the question that nobody asks. Why did Jimmy Burke give the most important post-heist job to a cocaine addict? Burke knew Stacks was using. He knew Stacks was unreliable. He'd watched him deteriorate for months. So why trust him with the one task that could bring down the entire crew? The answer is simple and brutal. Burke didn't trust him. Burke expected him to fail. And when Stacks failed, Burke had a clean excuse to do what he was always going to do anyway. Because Stacks knew too much. He knew the crew. He knew the plan. He knew where the money went. Alive, he was a potential witness, a potential informant, a permanent loose end. The van was just the reason. Burke just needed a reason. Stacks was dead the moment he got involved with Lufthansa. Maybe the moment he walked into Robert's lounge. Burke just needed him to screw up first so it looked like consequences instead of calculation. That's how men like Jimmy Burke operate. They give you a job you can't handle, and when you fail, they call it your fault. Stacks Edwards wasn't a screw-up junkie who threw away a golden opportunity. He was a disciplined athlete who lost his structure and his money and his direction and fell into the only world that would take him in. He thought working for Burke meant being close to power again, being important again. He didn't understand that in this world, there's no such thing as close to power. There's only useful and dead. Stacks' funeral was small. His mother, his girlfriend, a few guys from the old boxing gyms. Nobody from Burke's crew attended. They'd already forgotten him before he hit the ground. He's buried in Brooklyn, not far from where he grew up. A headstone with 2 dates, July 19th, 1950, December 18th, 1978, 28 years old. Goodfellas gave him one scene and called it a life. But the real Stacks Edwards deserved better than that. He was a fighter who couldn't find a fight worth winning, and he paid for it with everything he had. That's the story Goodfellas ignored. That's the truth behind the scene. And that's why, in the end, the men at the bottom always pay the highest price.